What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. We have seen quite a few lopsided standard formats where we've seen 2, maybe 3 decks towards the top of the metagame, and really that's kind of what I would expect, like 3 or 4 decks that you could conceivably play that you would probably put in like that tier 1 status of standard. 2 definitely doesn't feel good, and that's kind of what we saw at Pro Tour Final Fantasy, where we had a bunch of players playing Mono Red, a bunch of players playing Is It Prowess, and then we just kind of had the rest of the field made up of other decks that, you know, at one point, especially here in 2025, were pretty powerful and were very solid options that just kind of got thrown by the wayside, you know, and especially with now we had the banning of 7 different cards in standard, cards that weren't going to rotate, but that Wizards deemed to potentially be a problem, cards that we're seeing a ton of play in the format already, getting banned to kind of promote more deck diversity. And in some ways, it actually narrowed down the deck diversity even further than a Pro Tour that we had just a month or 2 ago that featured 2 different decks in the top 8, both of them playing out like their own mini bracket, and then Mono Red coming out on top over the Is It deck. So today we're going to talk about Is It Cauldron, a deck that was a brew at the Pro Tour, and then ended up being, you know, after all the bannings and after rotation with Edge of Eternities coming out, proven to be one of the best decks in the format, and has probably more of an argument of being one of the greatest standard decks of all time, rather than just being one of the best decks in standard right now. And really what I want to do in this video is just kind of discuss the potential options, because I think at this point it's a matter of when, not if, anything's going to get banned from this. And while I think the answer to that question is going to be pretty lackluster, it's not going to be very exciting, you know, it's not going to be, you know, anything of that nature, but I think that there is a potential alternative to the probably most obvious answer to that question, and I just kind of want to offer a little bit of insight and argument for, you know, why maybe you would want to keep one of the best creatures in the format around, rather than just kind of getting rid of it and just hoping that the metagame can kind of adapt and evolve from there, because it's having a hell of a time right now doing so. But before we get too deep into the video and we talk about potentially more bannings for the standard format, if you're already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me where we talk mainly about the modern standard format, we live stream modern here on the channel here. I absolutely love playing the format. We're going to be getting ready for the regional championship in Houston coming up here in a few months. Never too early to start practicing, so definitely if you're interested in any of that stuff, getting a little bit of an insight into like the testing that we're doing, all that fun stuff, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you know those videos get posted. It's a free, easy way to support me on my content. And if you want even more content, go ahead and check out the description down below. You'll find a link to my Twitch channel. You'll find a link to my Discord server, the Casual Spikes Podcast YouTube channel, and you will find a code down there to the sponsor of the channel, Manatraders. Using that code to sign up with Manatraders, you can save 5% off your monthly subscription. And you're probably wondering, Dakota, what is Manatraders? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Manatraders is a subscription service where you can rent cards on Magic the Gathering Online. You can rent and play decks like the Is It Cauldron deck, or maybe even the Esper Self-Bounce deck that is starting to see a resurgence in the standard format. But if you like playing in other formats, then you're able to go and rent those decks for those formats, try them out on Magic the Gathering Online, and you're essentially commitment free from actually buying all these cards and spending all the money to acquire these cards, because then you can just trade them back into Manatraders and then end up renting another deck. I use this a lot for, you know, play testing. I think it does a heck of a job of just kind of preparing me for the deck that I want to play, and not only that, but playing other decks so I can kind of get a good idea of what my opponent is going to be doing in whatever position that like I'm playing in. On top of that, too, also being a content creator, it's great to kind of shuffle different decks out and play different things kind of on stream. And if you want to kind of improve your testing, you want to get more into playing competitive Magic, and especially through Magic the Gathering Online, Manatraders is an absolutely amazing resource available to you. And like I said, if you use my code in the description down below, you'll get 5% off your monthly subscription. I want to thank Manatraders for being a sponsor to the channel. Now let's go ahead and talk about the big elephant, or in this case, the wizard in the room, that is Vivi, and why I think is the most likely card to see a ban here in the standard format. So here we have Vivi Ornithir, a 3-mana 0/3 legendary creature wizard that has 0 mana. You can add X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is Vivi Ornithir's power. Activate this only during your turn and once each turn. Whenever you cast non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vivi Ornithir, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So Vivi Ornithir, as I had said kind of in the intro of this video, it's easily the best creature in the standard format. Now, while there's another card that definitely pushes kind of Vivi, towards the edge of just being, one of the best creatures of all time, especially when it comes to, these different synergies that we're currently seeing in the standard format. The fact that a card like this can just give you a massive mana advantage. And there's like a few ways of accruing card advantage in multiple formats. There's actually just drawing more cards than your opponent. If you're seeing more cards, there's a chance that you're going to see more spells. You're able to play more spells, hit your land drops or whatever, you're going to win the game. And that's the key thing that we're going to focus on here with Vivi, because while this isn't going to be drawing us cards, it is giving us more mana potentially to work with on our future turns, allowing us to play more of our spells, potentially even playing some of those cantrip spells to where we're going to be able to look at more cards and play more impactful spells, because we're going to kind of have that selection of, again, drawing extra cards and just having a bunch of mana available to us. So we're double, triple, and quadruple spelling while our opponent is potentially single spelling through the early turns of the game and then double spelling a little bit later. But again, we've been doing it for a lot longer than them, so it makes it a lot harder for our opponent to catch up because those spells have to be incredibly impactful. Well, yes, Vivi is a dice to removal. Players should just play more removal. The fact that Vivi, and especially now with the Is It Cauldron decks kind of running around, and you could probably figure out like the other card that we're going to talk about here, but the fact that Vivi is like in the Is It Prowess decks before, if you removed a Vivi off the battlefield, that was a big win for you, even though a lot of those decks were kind of realizing like, okay, I don't have to run Vivi out on turn 3. I can play it on turn 4. I can use a Monstrous Rage. I can use Wild Ride, end up pumping it up absolutely massive, and then getting a bunch of mana right back and going and casting more spells, to where now like you're not going to be able to really kill the Vivi with damage-based removal, or you're going to be spending a ton of cards doing so. Or if I get to untap with this thing, not only am I going to be able to ping you for even more damage, not only am I going to be swinging with an absolutely massive creature, and if you remember at the Pro Tour, Monstrous Rage was still legal. You Monstrous Rage a Vivi, it's going to end up being, a 3/6 or a 4/7 with Trample as you're untapping with it, being able to generate even more mana, potentially get it up to a 6, 7, 8, 9 power creature, swing with it, trample over, deal a bunch of damage, and on top of that too, also dealing damage thanks to its ability. This card cannot be underestimated how good it is, and even if you're able to leave up removal for it, you definitely come ahead in that exchange. Like, I can't sit here and tell you that, hey, you left up removal to remove the best creature in the game, you lost that exchange, because it just isn't something that even remotely sounds right. However, if you're not forwarding your own board state, especially in how these VV decks are kind of set up, where they're able to kind of put a lot of pressure on you with individual creatures, as well as, of course, with Agatha's Soul's Cauldron, potentially making, all of these creatures into VVs that are just going to add a bunch of mana, and making these into like Draconautic Engineers that are going to end up making a bunch of dragons and giving them haste and whatever. Definitely VV being the best creature is a must-answer threat, because even if they don't have the Agatha's Soul's Cauldron stuff going on, if you leave a VV unchecked, they're just going to absolutely run you over and deal a bunch of incidental damage to you, to the point where now they just have a board full of, just normal creatures or whatever. Maybe, they have one engineer, maybe they got a little bit going with Prophetic Memory, that they can just kill you with the things that they have on board. And obviously that's not good. But then you take care of those things and you start losing like the Cauldron stuff. So like the deck as a whole has so much like synergy that kind of like wraps in on itself, and it's all kind of circulating, the center of, this deck and the center of the universe here in VV, where the deck will live and die by seeing a VV. I can only imagine that the deck is incredibly, is a much worse than any of the other decks in the format. If you never see a VV, you never have one in hand, you're never able to discard it, you're never able to get it in play, whatever the case may be. Which, of course, is pretty hard considering all the card advantage and, just the different kind of looting and rummaging kind of effects that this deck has. It's very hard to not find a VV. That said, your deck is incredibly worse without it. And, this is a card that I think a lot of players are going to point towards. And it's like saying, hey, like Agatha is very good because this VV card exists. It's, been kind of like memed here, a little bit of a competitive player in Standard, before VV, but, not really something that you had to necessarily be prepared for big time, not like anything in Modern before we had like Modern Horizons 3 and things like that. So really the boring answer is that VV is more than likely going to be the creature that gets banned. We know that it being like a newer card, at least the precedent here, we saw Corey Steelcutter get axed when it really wasn't in the standard for that long. And I believe it wasn't necessarily like the newest set out, but it was the set before. And with Vivi being in Universes Beyond, does that give it a little bit of protection? That's going to be the thing. I think that is a more interesting conversation than, if Vivi should be banned or not be banned. Absolutely. Again, it's one of the best creatures in the format. It has so much, so much that it does on its own, and then when you combine some of the other cards that exist in the format, it just absolutely cranks that pressure. That was already up, going 0 to 100.2 seconds is now like cutting that time in half, which is absolutely insane. So, for me, I think the answer is pretty boring. Vivi Order Tier has to leave the standard format. We have to be done with it. Modern can deal with it. Modern's been doing just fine and kind of handling the crazy Vivi stuff. So standard, it's got to go. But I do have kind of an alternative option that we could see, but I think more than likely we're going to see it be kind of either a package deal or Vivi getting banned. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at another card that could potentially be on the chopping block for standard. So of course, kind of what makes Vivi even more obnoxious, because again, you can play Vivi and your opponent removes it, and typically that's the end of it. Of course, players are way smarter than that. They play in a way where they're able to get instant value from their Vivi and potentially get a ton of mana out of it. But Agatha's Soul's Cauldron is the one that kind of makes Vivi even more obnoxious than it already is, right? So we have, Soul Cauldron, you end up tapping it, exiling Vivi from the graveyard. You're going to be able to give all your creatures with +1/+1 counters on them Vivi's ability to pay 0 to add mana in a combination of blue or red equal to its power, and then able to spend manas or mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. So it's like a double-edged sword here where you're giving your creatures an ability to add mana, and the more activated abilities that you add underneath of Agatha's Soul's Cauldron, and the fact that you don't have like a color restriction on what you're able to activate, just means that your creatures are able to activate whatever abilities that they want. Kind of funny that one of the best ones that they have is like Draconautics Engineer, where you can essentially spend 5 mana to put a 4/4 into play, and then give all your creatures haste and put a +1/+1 counter on the creature that activated those exhaust abilities. So then you're able to potentially add even more mana with the Agatha, with the Vivi ability that Agatha is kind of granting all of these creatures. So, it's really like this card is probably I'm not going to say like higher on the list or like more powerful than Vivi. I think Vivi is absolutely insane. It's just I think of how powerful of the activated abilities there are in standard is what is going to determine Agatha's Soul Cauldron exactly how good that card is going to be. Now, this card really didn't do a whole lot. There was a few different like Mimi style of decks where you're able to put like you're able to put a +1/+1 counter on something like I can't remember the creature. It would like untap itself, I think, when you cast like historic permanents, and then you would give it like Arcanist Omnipotence ability to like draw 3 cards. You could like draw 3 cards, cast a spell, untap it, draw another 3 cards, and just end up drawing a bunch of cards and doing some profs things there as well. Where players aren't really doing that now. Obviously, eating Vivi is like the best thing, and while we know that I think if you take away Vivi, like Agatha's Soul's Cauldron probably gets more looks at like, okay, what other creatures are really powerful, and what could I do with this Soul Cauldron to, make it incredibly broken like it is right now. But I think Vivi being the best creature and having one of the best activated abilities for all the reasons that we kind of outlined in the Vivi section of this, I think is just enough of a reason to end up just getting rid of Vivi altogether and just letting Agatha's Soul's Cauldron kind of do its thing. Plus, this is like a deck building thing that I think is a lot cooler than kind of like the Vivi like spells deck. We've seen Izzet, being very powerful and being one of the best decks in standard for quite a long time in this format, really since the standard regional championships that had been taking place. And then of course we had, that during modern, and then we had, the Pro Tour and everything like that. And really, actually, I think 2 Pro Tours where Izzet was like absolutely massive and seeing tons of play. Actually, no, I think it was right, Aether Drift. But my point stands is that, Izzet decks have been absolutely massive. They've been dominating the format for quite a while. I think it's probably just safer to get rid of Vivi, keep Agatha's Soul's Cauldron around, and just kind of see what other shenanigans that Soul Cauldron can kind of come up to, rather than, the stuff that Vivi's doing, because I think Vivi is more of a one-trick pony, but that one trick is, like, that's probably one of the best tricks that you can be doing. So, doesn't really hurt the card at all. But, as always, let me know in the comments down below if you think Vivi or Tier is going to get the ban hammer, if Agatha Soul's Cauldron could potentially join it as kind of like a little safety measure here, or if it's just free to kind of continue to do its thing. And I kind of hope so, because I absolutely love this card. It's always a lot of fun playing it, even though like it's seeing a lot of play now because of Standard having one of the best creatures it's ever seen in quite a while. But let me know in the comments down below what you think we could see in a potential ban and restricted announcement, or if there will even be any ban and restricted announcements made for the Standard format. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. Check out the description if you want even more content. But that's gonna do it for me for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. I hope to see you all in the next one.